So how was Sandy Berger able to walk out of the National Archives with top-secret documents? The answer? Archives staff didn't follow their own rules. For starters, Berger was ushered not into a stuffy skiff, but this windowed office overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue. It belonged to Nancy Smith, director of the Presidential Materials Staff, who didn't even make Berger leave his coat or briefcase outside the room. Smith had ready for Berger 3 boxes like these that included original top-secret national security documents.
Now, how sensitive were these documents?
They are, as far as I know, about as most sensitive records as we have in the United States government.
If you're writing notes, even if they're your own notes, while looking at those documents, those notes then become classified. They would have to remain here as part of the archives.
Absolutely correct.
Compounding that security breach, Smith also allowed Berger to take personal phone calls. She even stepped outside her office to give Berger privacy and left him alone with the top-secret documents.
Berger took advantage of Smith's lapses. One of the times she left him alone, as Berger would later admit, he folded up about 20 pages of his notes and stuffed them into his jacket pocket. At the end of the day, he just walked out of the door with them. This was the first crime that Berger committed that we know about.
Berger visited the archives a 3rd time a month and a half later, September 2nd, 2003. By this time, the 9/11 Commission had convened, and Berger was most interested in the highly classified Millennium Alert After-Action Review. As we told you, it was drafted by White House terrorism czar Richard Clarke after an alert customs agent in Washington state thwarted the terror attack planned for Los Angeles on January 1st, 2000. Former U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy, the lead prosecutor in the first World Trade Center bombings.
We know that the Millennium After-Action Review was a scathing attack of what the performance of the administration had been in the run-up to the millennium, that we only stopped it by luck.
Several drafts of the report, with comments from White House staff attached, existed in the files presented to Berger. That day, Berger made more requests that Smith step out of her office. He was also making frequent trips to the bathroom and sending Smith's staff on errands.
He had to make a phone call. He had to take a phone call. He was thirsty. So he asked one of the staff members to get him a Diet Coke. And that employee went to get him that drink.
When that staff member, named John Laster, returned with Berger's soda, he witnessed the notorious sock stuffing incident. Laster dashed off an email to his boss, Nancy Smith.
The archives staff member says, "Okay, I know this is odd. When I opened the door and started down the hall, he was stooped over right outside the doorway. He was fiddling with something white, which looked to be a piece of paper or multiple pieces of paper. It appeared to be rolled around his ankle and underneath his pant leg. We did not make eye contact. I can't be 100% sure of what I saw because it happened so quickly, but there was clearly something there more than his pants and his socks."
But whether in his socks or elsewhere, Berger does now admit he did indeed smuggle the highly classified Millennium After-Action Review out of the archives that night. On October 2nd, 2003, his 4th trip to the archives, the staff of Presidential Materials Director Nancy Smith had dreamed up a sting to catch him.
But is that their role, to be law enforcement? To set up a sting?
Clearly, I think not.
Paul Brockfeld is the Inspector General of the National Archives. He was the one Smith should have called to try to catch Berger. She didn't.
It was very damaging to the investigation and later prosecution.
What Berger did next wouldn't become known until much later. It shows the lengths to which Berger was willing to go as he compromised our nation's security. As Berger stepped out onto Pennsylvania Avenue, he had with him a stack of stolen documents about this thick, hidden somewhere on his body. He walked over to 9th Street. Now, at the time, the archives was undergoing renovation. There was a construction trailer right over there. According to Berger, he first looked up and down the street, then up at the windows of the archives, then over at the Justice Department across the street. Not seeing anybody, he folded up the documents and placed them underneath the trailer. Then he went back into the archives, essentially leaving top-secret documents basically out in the street.
Later, Berger retrieved the stashed documents and returned to his own office. He would later admit cutting some of them up with scissors into tiny pieces. Back at the archives, Nancy Smith and her staff waited another day to see what Berger had taken, and it was worse than they thought. In addition to document 217, they found 2 other versions of the Millennium Alert After Action Review were missing. These were text emails with a report attached. According to the congressional report, Smith would state, quote, "My staff and I were almost physically ill with the discovery of the missing emails." But still, they did not call law enforcement. They went to Berger himself. And Berger lied, repeatedly. First, he said archive staff must have lost the papers. Then he admitted he took some home inadvertently. Then he explained that he mistakenly destroyed and discarded some of the documents.
And what about the archive staff, whose many errors of judgment enabled Berger to commit the crimes and severely compromise the ability of investigators to figure out what he'd stolen and what damage it had done? Well, some received written reprimands, which we're told were later erased from their personnel files.
Commissioner Fred Fielding praised the Clinton administration for thwarting the Millennium bombing plot and cited the after-action review that Berger fixated on at the National Archives.
We're studying an event that is a colossal and tragic failure of our system. And there was one bright light as we're looking through this, and that was the Millennium plot. And the success of the Millennium plot and in averting problems. And as I understand, there was commissioned and presented in March of 2000 an after-action report on that.
I requested the after-action report. There were 29 recommendations. They basically were accepted, subject in some cases to funding. Now, some of those recommendations were implemented. As we learned since 9/11, some of them were not.
Consider the bizarre nature of that exchange. Fielding is taking testimony from Berger about a key event based on a document, several versions of which Berger had stolen from the archives and destroyed. What's more, Berger's bizarre behavior raised its own questions. All the while, the commission was left in the dark, and so were the American people. Until news of the investigation leaked in July 2004, just days before the publication of the 9/11 Commission's final report. As if on cue, the Clinton spin machine sprang to Berger's defense. The theme? Sandy Berger was an earnest but sloppy public servant who never could keep his papers in order. Clinton himself went on the David Letterman show and joked, quote, "Anybody that ever saw Sandy Berger's office at the White House wouldn't be surprised that he gets the papers mixed up or takes the wrong ones away," end quote. It wasn't true that Berger was just sloppy, but the media bought it. And what Berger said in his own defense was a flat-out lie.
I made an honest mistake.
9 months later, on April 1st, 2005, Berger struck a misdemeanor plea deal in which he admitted to illegally removing classified documents from the National Archives. Under his plea agreement, Berger would serve no jail time and would only have to pay a $10,000 fine, perform 100 hours of community service, and he'd lose his security clearance, though he can reapply for it in 3 years.
Throughout this hour, we've raised a lot of questions that we've not been able to resolve. As you've seen, many people who looked into this case think the official explanation for the Sandy Berger caper just doesn't add up. We've requested interviews from Nancy Smith and members of her staff, but the National Archives turned us down. They say the matter's over. The Department of Justice turned us down too. We also repeatedly asked Sandy Berger for an interview, but received only a letter from his attorney, Lanny Brewer. Brewer said Berger, quote, made some mistakes in his efforts to prepare thoroughly for the 9/11 Commission and has moved on with his life and his career. Brewer added, quote, it's unfortunate that Fox is rehashing this case.